Your mental armor is an internal firewall against the harmful words or actions of others that might otherwise undermine or diminish you. That's how Evy Poumpouras starts her book, Becoming Bulletproof.
And she would know.
Exactly. I mean, talk about someone who knows how to operate under pressure. As a former Secret Service agent, she guarded presidents and investigated crimes. So today we're going to dive into her book and really unpack what she has to say about becoming, well, bulletproof.
What's really cool about this book is that Evy doesn't just talk about physical safety.
Right.
It's really a tactical guide for how to handle any kind of challenging situation.
Oh, for sure.
And she breaks it down into three main parts: protection, awareness, and influence.
Love it. So let's start with protection. You know, Evy's experience on 9/11 offers a really powerful illustration of the difference between fear and panic. You know, she was off duty when the first plane hit the World Trade Center.
Oh, wow. Yeah, being in New York City on 9/11, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
And in a moment like that, it would be so easy to just completely panic. But Evy, she was able to tap into her training and take action. And that's what this book is all about. It's about learning to think clearly and make good decisions even when you're under immense pressure.
It's almost like panic shuts down your brain.
Yeah, it's like your brain is a high-performance engine and panic just floods it. It stalls out.
That's such a good analogy.
This book teaches you how to keep that engine running smoothly.
Even when it feels like everything is falling apart around you. I love that.
Yeah.
And there's another story in the book that I think is really relevant here. It's the one where Evy and her mom discover a burglar in their home. And it highlights how differently our brains can react to stress.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, Evy's instant reaction was to fight. Her mom, on the other hand, completely froze.
Ah, I see.
So it's that classic fight, flight, or freeze response. And neither response is necessarily right or wrong,
Right.
but it's crucial to understand your own pattern.
Oh, absolutely. Like if you know you tend to freeze up under pressure, you can work on developing strategies to overcome that. You can rewire your brain to respond differently.
It's almost like building a new pathway in your mind.
Exactly.
And Evy even talks about this concept called the Hormetic effect, which basically means that pushing your boundaries in controlled environments can help build resilience.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I know, right?
So it's like, I'm thinking like exposure therapy.
Kind of. So she went through some seriously grueling training at the NYPD and Secret Service academies. And those experiences really forged her mental toughness.
Yeah, I mean, going through something like that would definitely push you to your limits.
Oh, totally.
But it's like lifting weights. You stress your muscles to make them stronger.
Exactly. And Evy argues you can do the same thing with your mind.
I like that. So what are some small anxieties that our listeners could start lifting today? How do we apply this to everyday life?
That's a great question. I think even just starting to pay attention to those anxieties and those fears that come up can be a first step. You know, notice them without judgment. Then you can start to think about small ways to challenge yourself. Maybe it's speaking up in a meeting when you usually stay quiet, or trying something new that makes you a little bit uncomfortable.
I love that.
So you're not trying to eliminate fear altogether. It's more about learning to manage it. And Evy actually lays out a framework for building this mental armor. She calls it expose, acclimate, adjust, and overcome.
Okay, break that down for me. What does that look like in practice?
So basically, you gradually increase your exposure to those things that make you uncomfortable.
Ah, I see. So it's about slowly pushing your comfort zone a little bit at a time.
Right. So let's say public speaking terrifies you. Instead of signing up for a TED Talk tomorrow, you could start by sharing your ideas in a small team meeting. Then maybe you volunteer to give a presentation at work. And eventually you might work your way up to that TED Talk.
I love how Evy doesn't advocate for just becoming fearless. Because fear is a natural human response. It's there to protect us.
Totally.
It's about learning to master that fear so it doesn't completely paralyze you.
And that's where this whole idea of getting off the X comes in. It's a concept Evy learned from her firearms training. You never want to be a stationary target.
Oh, I see. Like literally and metaphorically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So think about that coworker who always seems to find a way to bring you down. That's like standing on the X. But you can choose to get off the X by not engaging in their drama.
So it's not about being weak or avoiding conflict altogether.
Right. It's about strategically choosing your battles. Sometimes the best way to protect yourself is to simply walk away.
I love that.
So we've got our mental armor, but how do we actually become resilient? Like, how do we bounce back from setbacks and challenges? And I think Evy's experience after 9/11 is really relevant here. She went through a lot of trauma, but she found ways to cope and ultimately emerge stronger.
It's really inspiring to see how she was able to come out of that experience even stronger. So how can we, as listeners, cultivate that same kind of resilience in our own lives?
Evy is really big on the idea that resilience isn't a personality trait. It's a skill that you can develop through practice.
Okay, so it's not like you're just born resilient.
Right. It's like a muscle you have to work out.
I like that. So how do we start working out that resilience muscle?
Evy talks a lot about the power of reframing situations. So instead of focusing on the problems, you focus on the solutions.
Okay, can you give me an example?
She tells a story about a coworker who wasn't pulling their weight on a project. Instead of getting caught up in the frustration and the negativity, she focused on how to get the project done successfully, regardless of her coworker's lack of effort.
So it's like shifting from a problem mindset to a solution mindset.
Yeah, it's about choosing to focus your energy on what you can control.
So it's not about ignoring the problem, it's about approaching it from a more empowering perspective.
Exactly. Evy also talks about the importance of accepting reality, even when it's unpleasant.
Oh, I see.
Like, as a Secret Service agent, she had to prepare for the possibility of an assassination attempt on the president. Even while hoping and believing that her security plan would work.
So it's like finding that balance between optimism and also being realistic about the potential risks.
Right. Like, you don't have to be naive to be hopeful. You can acknowledge that bad things can happen, but also believe in your ability to handle them if they do. So we started to build our mental armor and explored the importance of mental resilience. But how do we actually see the threats coming before they strike?
Yeah, how do we do that?
Well, that's where Evy's Secret Service mindset comes in. I think a lot of people hear Secret Service and they picture, like, guys in suits and sunglasses.
Yeah, very stoic.
But it's not really about that.
No, it's more about cultivating a proactive approach to safety and always thinking a few steps ahead. Like, what could go wrong and what's my plan?
Yeah. Evy is the example of the Secret Service advanced teams. The ones who scope out a location before the president arrives.
Right.
And they're looking for potential threats, planning escape routes, that kind of thing.
So they're basically doing risk assessments and contingency plans for every possible scenario.
Exactly. And I think that's something we can all apply to our everyday lives, even if we're not guarding the president.
Yeah, totally. So how do we do that? How do we think of like a Secret Service agent in our normal day-to-day lives?
Well, think about your daily commute. Like, do you know alternate routes in case of an accident or traffic jam?
Oh, that's a good one. I usually just rely on my GPS to tell me what to do.
Right. But what if your phone dies or you lose signal?
Okay, that's a good point. I never really thought about it that way.
Or consider your favorite restaurant. Do you know where the exits are? It's not about being paranoid, it's about being prepared.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like having a plan in place before you need it so you're not caught off guard.
Exactly. And Evy even tells a story about being on Barbara Bush's protection detail and how she realized that she had memorized their routes so well she didn't even need a GPS.
Wow, that's impressive.
Right. And this highlights the danger of relying solely on technology, like what happened on 9/11. Cell towers went down. People couldn't get in touch with each other.
Oh, yeah. That's scary to think about.
Yeah. So in a true emergency, your pre-planned escape route could be the difference between life and death.
So it's not about living in a constant state of fear. It's about taking control of your environment and not leaving your safety to chance.
Yes, I love that. So let's dive into some specifics. Evy offers a lot of practical advice for bulletproofing your life.
Right.
And one of the most important things she talks about is situational awareness.
Right. Especially in public places, like being aware of your surroundings.
Totally. She talks about being vigilant in parking lots. Like, always scan your surroundings as you approach your car. Don't be looking at your phone. Don't be distracted.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that sometimes.
We all are. And once you're in the car, lock those doors immediately. Don't sit there scrolling through your phone with the doors unlocked.
It's like you're making yourself an easy target.
Exactly. It's about minimizing those windows of vulnerability. Predators often target people who are distracted or unaware of their surroundings.
So it's really about just being present and paying attention.
Yes. And Evy also gives some surprising advice about safeguarding our homes. And it all starts with landscaping.
Landscaping. Okay, this I got here.
So she recommends keeping bushes and trees trimmed back.
Ah, so they don't provide cover for potential intruders.
Exactly. And be mindful of what you're leaving in your yard, like, that big screen TV box that basically advertises, hey, I just bought something expensive.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
And of course, she cautions against posting about vacations on social media while you're still away. Wait until you get home to share those photos.
Right, because you don't want to announce to the world that your house is empty.
Exactly. And it's crazy, but if you're always posting from the same coffee shop every Monday morning, you're basically giving away your routine.
And that could make you a target.
Yes. So it's all about being mindful of the information you're putting out there and how it could be used against you.
This section is a little bit unsettling, but it's also empowering in a way.
I think so too. It's like Evy is giving us a set of tools to be more in control of our own safety.
Exactly. It's not about living in fear, but about being aware of potential risks and taking simple steps to protect ourselves.
Okay, so we've covered protection, we've talked about awareness, and now it's time to move on to the fascinating world of influence. This is where her Secret Service background really comes into play.
It does. And she kicks off this section with a great story. It's about a Secret Service applicant who lied about drug use.
Okay.
And Evy could tell just by picking up on these subtle behavioral cues.
So is she saying that we can all become human lie detectors?
Kind of. It's more like she wants to help us become more aware of the signals people are sending.
Oh, interesting.
Evy points out that everybody lies. It's just a part of human nature.
I guess that's true.
And we do it for lots of different reasons. Sometimes it's to be kind. Sometimes it's to protect someone's feelings.
Oh yeah, like telling your friend you like her new haircut when you really don't.
Exactly. So it's not always some huge malicious thing.
That's a good reminder. Not to take it personally when someone lies to us.
Right. It's not always about us. And that's actually a key point when it comes to reading people effectively.
Oh, how so?
Evy says that when we let our egos get involved, it clouds our judgment. We start seeing things that aren't really there.
Okay, so how do we move past that ego barrier and start accurately reading people?
Well, Evy talks about establishing a baseline for someone's behavior.
A baseline.
Yeah. It's basically observing how someone acts in a neutral, relaxed setting. That way you can compare it to how they act in a higher stakes situation.
Oh, I see. So you're looking for any deviations from that normal behavior?
Exactly. And she gives examples of common tells that people might exhibit when they're not being truthful or when they're nervous. Things like eye contact, smiling, fidgeting, even hugging.
Interesting. So it's not about relying on a single tell.
Right. It's more about looking for clusters of these behaviors.
That makes sense. Evy also shares some great advice about influencing others.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one.
And she actually starts off with a story about realizing her Secret Service persona wasn't working in a job interview at Fox News.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, she had this tough agent act that worked great for intimidating suspects.
Yeah.
But it wasn't exactly charming the Fox News executives.
So she learned that you can't use the same approach in every situation.
Right. This experience taught Evy that influence isn't about manipulating people. It's about building rapport and connecting with them on a genuine level.
And that can take different forms depending on who you're interacting with.
Exactly. She talks about the importance of being present, truly listening to what people are saying and using their names.
Which sounds so simple.
Right. But I think most of us could do a better job at it.
Oh, definitely. I know I could.
And Evy has another great tip. She's big on asking open-ended questions.
Open-ended questions.
Yeah, questions that encourage people to share more information. And she uses this acronym, TED.
TED.
Yeah, it stands for Tell, Explain, Describe.
Oh, that's smart. So instead of asking, did you like the movie, you could ask, tell me about the movie. What did you think?
Exactly. And that way you're not leading them to a particular answer. You're getting them to open up and share more.
I love that. And I think that leads into her points about recognizing when someone is trying to shut down a conversation.
Yeah, like with deflections or vague responses.
All right.
She actually gives strategies for handling those situations. Like if someone says, you should already know this, you can simply reply, I'd love a refresher.
Oh, that's good.
It keeps the conversation going and prevents you from getting sidetracked.
So much of this is about being aware of those subtle communication dynamics.
It is.
Yeah.
Evy even delves into some of the psychology behind communication.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she shares a story about how she used something called the Pepsi Challenge during an interrogation.
The Pepsi Challenge, like the old commercial.
Yeah, she purposely mirrored the suspect's behavior to build rapport, which eventually led to a confession.
That's so interesting. So even something as small as mirroring someone's body language can create that sense of connection.
It can. Or using similar words and phrases, it subconsciously signals to the other person that you're on the same wavelength.
So it's all about building that trust and rapport.
And that trust is essential if you want to influence someone. And Evy is a big believer in the power of empathy. She says that even in high-pressure situations, finding a way to connect with the other person on a human level can be incredibly effective.
Yeah, I can see how that would apply to her work in the Secret Service.
Absolutely. She was able to get confessions from suspects by putting them at ease and making them feel understood.
Wow.
And one of the most powerful stories in this section is about Evy being on President Clinton's protection detail. And she learned the importance of maintaining composure under pressure.
Oh, I bet that was intense.
Oh, for sure. And she had this mantra that she would repeat to herself, don't drop the hose.
Don't drop the hose.
Yeah, it's this metaphor for staying calm and focused in the middle of chaos. It's about being the steady presence, the one people can rely on when things get crazy.
I love that. It's such a vivid image.
It is. And Evy also talks about the importance of owning your mistakes. She shares a story about taking responsibility for her site agent's error during President Obama's security detail.
Wow, that must have been a tough situation.
It was. But she realized that trying to cover it up or shift the blame would have been so much worse.
Yeah, it's so tempting to do that, but it usually backfires.
Totally. It's much better to just be upfront and take responsibility.
And it actually builds trust in the long run.
It does. And Evy also reflects on some of the leaders she protected and the qualities that made them so effective.
I'm curious to hear what she learned from them.
Well, she talks about President George H.W. Bush's humility.
Really? That's not always the quality you associate with powerful people.
I know. But she says that he had this genuine appreciation for everyone, no matter what their job or status was.
That's beautiful.
She also talks about Hillary Clinton's fortitude in marching in the Gay Pride Parade, even though there were security concerns.
That's just so brave.
And she admires George W. Bush's authenticity, his ability to just be himself, even under the immense pressure of the presidency.
I think that's something a lot of people struggle with.
Totally. Like, how do you stay true to yourself when you're in a role that demands so much of you?
Exactly. And it's not just about presidents and politicians. I think it's relevant to anyone who's in a leadership position.
Oh, absolutely. And Evy also talks about Barack Obama's magnanimity, like his ability to be big-hearted and generous, even when he was dealing with a difficult person.
I love that example.
It's inspiring to see those leadership qualities play out in real life. And the book ends with a really interesting reflection on the importance of solitude.
Solitude. That seems kind of counterintuitive in a book about social influence.
I know, right? But Evy argues that solitude is crucial for creativity and personal growth. It's about taking time to think for yourself, free from the influence of others, to connect with your own values and develop your own voice. So what's your biggest takeaway from all of this?
Wow, there's so much to choose from. But I think for me, it's that we're never done with fear.
That's true.
But we can choose courage in the face of it. You know, we can develop the mental armor, the awareness, and the influence to face life's challenges head on.
And become truly bulletproof.
Exactly.
As Evy says, to find the strength to bear the unbearable. That is what it means to be bulletproof.
Such a powerful quote.
It is. Well, thanks for joining us for the deep dive into Becoming Bulletproof by Evy Poumpouras. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You'll find a link to the book in the description.